been 1 week since the Trump administration released documents and reports on threats against the security of America's elections. These included China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files containing sensitive data, and efforts by career staff in the intelligence community and law enforcement to suppress the seriousness of China's election influence operations. This suppression included limiting what information was shared among intelligence agencies, while other reports were deliberately massaged to omit references to the 2020 election, allowing a shadow government to keep the aims and magnitude of China's influence operation from senior federal officials, including President Donald Trump. These revelations come after similar efforts to limit intelligence on the origins of COVID-19 were exposed by then Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and raise more questions about how the American intelligence community operates. Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist Catherine Herridge has been poring over the documents and connecting even more dots, and we are thrilled to have her back with us tonight to break it all down. So, Catherine, great to see you. So, you were here last time. This president had just given his speech from the White House. We've gone through some of the documents, but you've had some time now. What additionally have you found?
I think the big record that stands out is this instant messaging with a very senior FBI official who does counterintelligence, who describes this shadow government. But what's significant about Nikki Flores is that you need to really start to connect the dots. And since the release last week, I spoke with Senator Ron Johnson, and he confirmed to me that in August of 2020, so right about the same time that the Chinese election influence operation was being suppressed, he said Nikki Flores came to him and Senator Grassley and did what's called a defensive briefing. A defensive briefing is given by the FBI when they think that you are the target of a foreign disinformation campaign. In this case, they were briefed about Russia. And Senator Johnson told me he believes this was an effort by the FBI to discourage him and Senator Grassley from pursuing the Hunter Biden laptop, and that this whole defensive briefing was designed to lay the groundwork for that larger obfuscation, which was that the laptop was not credible and it was not authentic.
So you've been reporting on this kind of intelligence suppression for a very long time. You're the best at it, but of course, and before President's speech last week. But it seems that we're looking at a pattern here of the intelligence community getting information and then deciding what they think should or should not be briefed to senior officials, including President Trump in particular. Is there a pattern, whether it's COVID or the Hunter Biden laptop or Chinese influence, depending on a political narrative? I mean, why is certain information relayed and other information is not?
In the last week, I've been speaking with a very senior member of Director Gabbard's investigations team known as the DIG. And what they told me is that they did see a pattern where there was a sense or a feeling in the intelligence community that they just knew better. They had to save President Trump from his own instincts, from his own tendencies, and that there was very much a globalist view, and they had to preserve a globalist view. So whether it was downplaying or suppressing intelligence about the threat from China, whether it was giving a pass and calling the Hunter Biden laptop Russian disinformation, there was this level of a bureaucracy, a kind of conspiracy that was making decisions about the kind of information that should be reaching policymakers and ultimately the commander-in-chief.
So if that information is not being relayed to the proper, especially elected officials, and they are about real credible threats against the country, how can these officials even address those threats properly if they're not relaying them to the people who are in charge of making decisions?
This is exactly the point. This is not a political question. It's not a Democrat or a Republican question. It's about getting information to the decision makers so that they can make choices that benefit the United States and U.S. national security. And what we saw in the release of the records, which I'm afraid, I think, in the media or legacy media, there was kind of a willful blindness. They didn't want to look at the records. All you had to do was spend a couple of hours. I found these records, which are talking about blackmail by China. It was for President Biden's daily brief. I can conclude, I think, that it was probably about targeting his family. When that kind of information is not reaching a decision maker, ultimately the United States and the American people are the losers.
Right.
And I think that's what people need to be focused on.
Well, it's dangerous as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're not getting into it. You've also mentioned that transparency falls short without accountability.
That's right.
Given that we've seen this shadow government in a number of very serious examples, what kind of accountability do we need to change this? I mean, the president clearly is trying to get this out there. DNI Gabbard was doing this, former DNI, but it doesn't seem like there's been much punishment for the people who are engaged in this kind of behavior.
I think this is one of the most frustrating things for folks at home and, you know, all over social media is they're like, when am I going to see a perp walk? When am I going to see criminal charges? I did a little research, and there are actually multiple criminal statutes that were violated here. There's something which is essentially the abuse of your position as a member of the government. It's sort of color of law is the statute. There could be violations under the Military Code of Justice. Many of these intelligence agencies fall under the Department of War. There are conspiracy charges, and then there are more ethics violations under the Senior Executive Service. So in fact, there's really almost a buffet of choices in terms of picking charges. And the question is whether this administration is going to go the distance here, because I think the release of the records is half the story. I think the accountability is the part that the public is really looking for.
Well, so it seems like we have some questions for the Department of Justice and whether they will pursue those charges. Speaking of that, I want to get to the House Judiciary Committee's criminal referral for former special counsel Jack Smith. It deals with Smith's testimony about lawmakers and obtaining their phone records in ways that he should not have. Here's what he said in December 2025.
Did the toll records that you requested from the senators, did they include the content of the phone calls?
No.
Did the records that you requested, the toll records from the members of Congress, include the content of text messages?
No.
So Smith did not disclose to his team that they obtained text messages of 44 members of Congress through
Republicans and Democrats.
Right, through a separate National Archives request. Can you break down the difference between toll records and the content of the messages that were obtained here?
Sure. I think one of the biggest myths of the Jack Smith investigation is that the collection of these toll records was just not a big foul, that you're only talking about the phone number, the date, the time, the length of the call. But I know from career FBI agents that these toll records, or what they call metadata, can actually be more revealing than the content of the calls themselves, because it maps out your network of contacts, and it also shows the strength of those relationships. I think in that clip that we just watched, I think it's going to be a hard call to say that he lied to Congress. He didn't fully answer the question. You can make the argument that he misled Congress, but it's clear that he developed this workaround, this National Archives workaround, to get the contents of those calls. And that is a huge foul. That is a violation of the speech and the debate clause. And when I've spoken to people within the White House and the national security arena, their jaws just drop when they learn that this happened.
Yeah.
And there may be no consequence ultimately for
Well,
it.
it's certainly shady, if not illegal.
Shady. I love how you put that.
Shady is a good word for that kind of behavior. Before we go, we have to ask you, you're currently been forced to pay contempt fines of $800 per day to a U.S. district court because you were standing up for the First Amendment and refusing to reveal your sources in a story that you reported years ago.
It's almost a decade ago. I was at Fox News. When I was held in contempt of court in 2024, one of our children asked me if we would lose our house, we would lose our savings, that I could go to jail for protecting my reporting sources. And I wanted to tell him that in the United States, where we say we value a free press and the First Amendment, it was impossible, but I could not offer him that assurance. Today, I wrote my fourth check to the U.S. District Court for an $800 daily fine for the contempt. And I can tell you that the plaintiff in this case, Yanping Chen, is asking the court to raise the fines to $5,000 a day. This is designed to break the journalist mentally, emotionally, and financially. And I am so grateful for the support I've received from everyone at home, on social media. It's been a very challenging time for me and my family, but I remain committed to protecting the principles of investigative journalism. And I am so grateful that Fox News has stood firmly behind me and the importance of a free press.
Absolutely.
And I didn't work there for the last 7 years, and it says a lot about them that they are really standing up for me.
Well, I know that the battle is ongoing, and we will continue to keep up with that. And hope to talk to you more soon about your amazing journalism, because you are the best, and we appreciate you sharing all the details with us. Catherine Herridge, good luck with that. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.